Welcome back to the Black Swamp Basketball Podcast presented by the Gherkin Company. Is joined again this week by Dave Krauss. I'm Lynn Groll, and I don't know who the stranger in the middle is here. Do you know this guy, Coach?
I thought he was supposed to wear a name tag. We haven't seen him.
Well, hey, I had trouble finding this place because we took a couple weeks sabbatical after football, and I could not remember where this place was. And I did some digging. I found
you've been driving around for a couple weeks?
Well, I have.
Happened to come upon it. Huh?
I did. I thought it was in town.
Did you smell the cheddar brats?
I did.
I think he probably heard they were out, so he said, heck, I'm not going back here.
That's part of the deal, because when I did stop near Christmas, the freezer was cleaned out, and I wasn't happy. So truth be told, that's why I haven't been here.
The famous Tory Strock is back with us for the first time on our third season of our basketball podcast. Good to see you, Coach.
Hey, it's good to be back.
It's been a few weeks.
It has, and got the batteries recharged a little bit, and it's a fun time of year. I can't believe how far the hoop scene is down the road already. I mean, 15-ish games, depending on the gender, and man, oh man, there's some dynamite ball clubs in the area.
Well, we brought you in this week because we have to hand out the Team of the Week presented by the Gherkin Companies. We'll hear from the Gherkin Companies, and then you two can duke it out for the Team of the Week. Because Coach Krauss has had to do it the last couple weeks for us.
Well, there ain't gonna be much. There ain't gonna be much duking out. There ain't gonna be much of a fight, because this guy, I've seen his list. He's much better schooled than I.
We'll be right back.
Who says a college degree is the only path to a fulfilling career? At the Gherkin Companies, we offer rewarding livelihoods with or without a degree. Gherkin provides a generous benefits package, continuous training, top-notch equipment, and a culture that rewards effort. We're looking for rock-solid performers to help build and reinforce the region's infrastructure. Whether you have construction experience or are just starting your career, apply now at gherkincompanies.com/careers.
Thank you again to the Gherkin Companies, title sponsor of our basketball podcast. Again, this season, there was a big game down in Marion Local over the weekend, Coach. I don't know if that one's going to figure into our boys' side Team of the Week or not, but Central Catholic with a nice win over St. John's as well.
No, for sure. You hit a couple of the teams that I wanted to highlight right off the get-go, and why don't we just start with the guys? And you mentioned Delphus, undefeated in the MAC. And they went down to Marion Local, who was undefeated in the MAC at the same time, and undefeated overall, and just beat them soundly. And that's not easy. You go into an opponent's gym in that conference and come away with a 30-point win. That's impressive, really impressive. The other team you mentioned, Central Catholic. We sat here last week with Johnny Floyd here, and he gave me the evil eye when I didn't mention Toledo Central Catholic as a team of the potential week. And
his brother coaches there, for full disclosure.
And I was picturing how his mama was not liking what I was not saying. So Toledo Central Catholic has been on a great roll. They've won now 5 straight games. Beat Pearisburg last evening, now 10-2, 4-1 in that ultra competitive, tough league what they travel to up in Detroit, that Catholic league they play in. And you got to give them props, and just a few other teams that I'm going to throw out because they're doing really well. Genoa in the Northern Buckeye, John Sandwich has got them undefeated, 12-0, 6-0 in league play. Van Buren, 11-1 in the BBC. That's really impressive. 6-0. They basically have a league title already wrapped up because there's only one more league game, I believe, and they've got that wrapped. Montpelier up in the BBC, 12-1, having a fantastic season as well. So, and then Lima Senior down in Lima done a good job, and they're one of the losses that Central Catholic has. So, to go up and beat Central Catholic in Toledo, that was impressive. So, my game of the week, my team, we could go through Delphus and we go through Genoa, both undefeated, but I like Central Catholic. I think what they've done and who they've done it against and on this roll, and they've played some really tough teams, and they're going to flip their schedule now and play the round robin, the second piece of it. And so they've got a long, tough haul to go. But, I like where Mike Floyd has his team right now. So I would be my vote for the men's side Team of the Week.
I'm not going to disagree. I know they've won 10 of their last 11 or something like that. And they beat some heavyweights on this stretch. The one that's gotten a ton of traction is the St. John's highlights at St. John's,
right.
Against a really good St. John's Club. So yeah, I like Central Catholic, and like you said, second time around, we'll see how it goes. But looks like they're built for the long haul.
Can we make that official? We'll make Mama Floyd, Joanne happy.
Stamp 'em.
Central Catholic, our men's team of the week.
I think that's a go for me.
Congratulations to the Irish.
Have you guys talked about the Defiance Bulldogs?
We haven't, but they deserve some mention, obviously.
Yeah, they're off to they've won 8 of their last 9, and they're rolling right now.
Yeah.
So wanted to mention the Bulldogs.
Yeah, they're playing well. They've got, Wapak is the leader in that league, and Wapak was our first week team of the week. So Defiance is sniffing there, but they're going to need some help.
Yep.
On the ladies' side, boy, there's some really good teams. I'm going to just start right off down in the GMC, Paulding 15-1. That's impressive. That's a great win. And then you get with the 4 teams we've talked about all along is Ottawa Glandorf, undefeated, who have been named team of the week. But then the other 3 teams that they have on their schedule, Grove, Miller City, and Patrick Henry, they've all kind of beat each other. And Grove just did that to Miller City to give them their second loss on the season. So, that threesome there is impressive. Patrick Henry, I love how they play. I enjoy watching them play. They have a big game tomorrow night, Thursday night with Wauseon, at Wauseon, I believe. And then they have a makeup game that got canceled Monday. They have LB at LB. So they've got an interesting week ahead of them. But I lean back and I got to go back to Toledo and Anthony Wayne. Again, they're 11-3, but 5-0 in the Buckeye, and that's the big division up there. They've lost 3 games, and the team they've lost to are really good, solid teams from out of the area. Akron, Hoban, Cleveland Brush, and then the Spire Academy. They played them in a little showcase. Spire Academy is not your typical high school team. They're a prep school type of team, and they import these kids from all over the place. And they battled them but lost. But I like Anthony Wayne and what they're doing up there. I would be my team of the week on the ladies' side.
Can't argue that. And that schedule, the new coach kind of inherited that, so to speak, because of the success that they've had over the last few years, and they're still pretty doggone talented. But I had a chance to watch Patrick Henry host Napoleon over Christmas break. And, boy, they're a pretty complete team.
Yeah.
And you have the pair of sisters. And we know Ada Chrisman's really good, but the younger Chrisman, is that Ella?
Ella.
She is dynamite.
Yep.
On the board. I mean, she gets after it. And she's one of those, Patrick Henry, they're probably going to make a nice tournament run, those gals. And the younger Chrisman's going to be a big reason why.
And younger Crossland as well. Both of those, that Toole family dual combination is really and they're all 5'11" and taller.
Yes, they are.
So that's impressive. They got some length and size on them, and they are a fun team to watch.
Yeah. No, Krauss, you summed it up. I had a couple of those teams you mentioned. I had them jotted down, but can't argue with the Lady Generals, especially with that schedule.
Yeah. Congratulations to the Anthony Wayne ladies this week, our ladies team of the week. We're going to be right back. Stay tuned with great Fran Fraschilla, longtime college basketball icon. He's going to join us remotely, and we're going to have him on, so stay tuned for that. Back to the Black Swamp Basketball Podcast presented by the Gherkin Companies, along with Dave Krauss and Tory Strock. I am Lynn Groll, and honored to have college basketball icon Fran Fraschilla joining us. Thank you so much, Coach. It's a great honor to have you join our broadcast here today.
Well, thank you, Lynn. When Krause calls me and asks if I can do a podcast, there's not no in the vernacular. It's let me make it work. And this is a great day. I'm not traveling today, and glad to be with you. I am not in Philadelphia at the Palestra, in case anybody's watching this, but this is my Zoom background. But great to be with you guys,
Coach. I've enjoyed your work for many years. I'm a football guy, I guess, by trade, but I'm a big basketball guy, and I was telling Coach Krauss and Lynn before we got on the air here that, I did a little digging. I knew a lot of your background at Manhattan and all that stuff. But I wanted to do a little digging and just kind of get an idea what questions may be off maybe off limits or whatever. And then I get into your social media a little bit, and I told Coach Krauss, I said, I don't think anything's off limits.
I love social media because it gives me a chance, especially nowadays with college athletics being like turned upside down, to vent a little bit, to share my thoughts. Been around the game for 45 years. I can't believe how fast it's gone, as Coach Krause knows. But no, I love, I love, and I also love being an advocate for coaches too, especially the younger coaches. We were all young coaches at one point, but nothing's off limits, Tory. I can tell you that.
Well, thank you, Coach.
Coach, you grew up in Brooklyn. You were born there. What was life like as a young kid?
Well, it's funny. It's interesting, Lynn. I'm writing a book right now that's just about done. We'll publish it in the fall. And it really started my love of basketball. You grow up in New York City on the asphalt playgrounds. I'm old enough to tell you that when I was young, the Knicks were really good. They were an iconic team. All five starters are now in Naismith's Hall of Fame. And so a lot of us grew up with, they call it the city game, right? You've heard that term, the city game, even though spending 8 years in Ohio, I saw a lot of kids who had baskets on the side of the barn that were pretty good players too. But I grew up in the city, and I grew up, well, I was a baseball player, really good one, I think, kind of an all city level baseball player in New York. But basketball was my love. And I knew I wasn't going to be an NBA player. So probably about the time I was 14, I knew I wanted to be a basketball coach. And it all started because I grew up in an environment in New York where basketball was the big deal, in the city.
Could you hold your own on the playgrounds back then?
You know what? I was like I was a really good pass first point guard. I was talking to somebody today that was a really good player. I was driving home from Colorado Springs, and I said, I was the kind of guy that if I had a 3-on-1 break and I threw it and I could hit either guy, when I passed it to the guy for the layup when we were running back down, I would tell the other guy who didn't get the ball, keep running, man. I saw you. I got you. And I always got the ball to everybody touched the ball the first 5 possessions. That's one thing I learned on the playground, that, hey, even if we got one really good player, let's make sure everybody touches it and stays involved. And that kind of thinking really kind of gravitated into me being a guy that became a guy that loved coaching. So that's where it all started. And I spent 22 years in New York. I went to a commuter school, Brooklyn College. And at the time, I think when I was 23, Danny Nee and Billy Hahn brought me out to Ohio University. And I will never forget coming around the bend to the Hocking River onto the campus of Ohio U, seeing that great big convocation center. And honestly, I got hooked on, I'm a Midwest kind of mentality anyway. And I had 8 great years in the state of Ohio, many, many friends, obviously. And, that's where it started in New York, but it really cultivated my coaching in the state of Ohio for sure.
Well, that's where you and I first crossed paths. We took
Yep.
some teams down to the famous OU Danny Nee team basketball camps, and
Yes.
same thing. That's the first time I was ever in the convo, and I come
Yeah.
down 33, and you see that thing, and you go, "Whoa, this thing is impressive!" And
I know.
meet you and Danny and Billy, and boy, that was just some really great memories and fun
Yeah.
times in the summer. But you took your team down there for a reason because you knew you're going to face really competitive squads. That's for
Oh,
sure.
and we did have fun after camp ended,
Uh,
right?
I
About
think
9
there was
o'clock.
there were some good sessions at
Yeah.
at
You
different
know,
places.
I always say this to people, Dave. I mean this. Like if God took me early and I got to the gates of heaven and hey, we made a mistake. We got to send you back to earth for 1 year. I would tell him, hey, can you send me back to Athens, Ohio in my early 20s? Because I think that's, I had so much fun. I met my wife there. She was a grad student at Ohio U. She's a Dallas girl, New Yorker, Dallas, and a Dallas girl. We met halfway in the middle. But I had 6 great years in Athens, Ohio, and then of course, as Coach knows, I went to Ohio State for 2 more and spent my 20s in the state and have a million friends like Coach Krause.
Well, you worked obviously with Danny, and part of this reason, part of we got this together, Coach, is is through our Jay Lehman interview we had with a couple of weeks ago, and it got me
Yeah.
thinking, boy, Fran would be an awesome guest. And we reached out, and you were so
Yeah.
willing to join. I appreciate that. But
Well, Jay was the better player of the Lehmans. Kirk played no defense at all, and but he could shoot it. And no, I'm joking because you guys, if you know Kirk and Coach Krauss obviously knows, you can bust Kirk's chops. Even when I was a young coach and he was still playing, I coached him his senior year, my first year. And even after that, he was our grad assistant and then went on and had his great high school career. You could always bust Kirk's chops about things like that. You weren't athletic, you played no defense. You hurt us, we would have won this game. We'd have beaten Miami if you didn't give up 28 points. But no, we had some great memories. I still do. I always think about my days at Ohio U and all the great friends I have.
well, then you left the friendly confines of the Convo in Athens, Ohio, and move up 33 to the Ohio State University and working
Yep.
for one Gary Williams. So talk
Yeah.
about that experience.
It's funny. Here's how I got the job. Because of Billy Hahn, Dave, as you know, played at Maryland, and Gary Williams played at Maryland before Billy, and he played with a guy named Joe Harrington, who coached Billy under Lefty Driesell. Joe had a guy who he hired by the name of Rick Barnes, and Rick was at George Mason. Then he went to Alabama with Wim Sanderson, and when Gary Williams got the job, Joe Harrington and Gary Williams were college roommates at Maryland. So I was in a little Maryland mafia with Billy Hahn. And Rick Barnes called me from Alabama and he said, "Hey, Gary Williams is offering me this job at Ohio State." And I said, "Rick, you got to take it." I said, "This is a great state for basketball. I can't recruit Jimmy Jackson or Trey Lee, but when you get up to Columbus, I'll give you all the names of the guys you should recruit that I knew I couldn't get to come to Ohio U." And so we helped Gary and Rick get started. And I remember during Rick's first year, he said to me, "You're going to be the next assistant at Ohio State." And I was like, "I don't know Gary Williams." And he said, "Gary doesn't know who to hire. I've already told him he's hiring you." And that's a true story. And
That's great.
my interview with Gary was like 5 minutes at the US Air Club. It's not even there anymore in Columbus. And like it took 5 minutes and he just basically said, "We got a good situation here." That was the interview. I said, "Coach, you offer me the job?" "Yeah." I said, "I'm in." And the coolest thing, as Coach Krauss knows, is it wasn't like I left my recruiting base.
Yeah,
Instead of recruiting like, the 20th best player in the state of Ohio, I was now recruiting the top three players. All those, oh gosh, Mark Baker from Dayton Dunbar. And by the way, a lot of these kids, Dave, these were like Dayton Dunbar came to the Ohio U camp because Mike Haley played at OU.
Mhm.
So when I went to Ohio State, I was already locked in with the best coaches in the state. Canton McKinley, Barberton, Cleveland St. Joe's, St. John's and Toledo with Billy Axe. Billy, was that where he was? Was he at?
Yep.
Yep.
He was a Central Catholic.
Yeah, Central Catholic, Toledo Central. Yeah. So that was shooting fish in a barrel at Ohio State recruiting because I'd already pretty much knew the whole state.
Well, and then, this is my own personal bias, but Ohio State played in what I consider the almost great environment, St. John
Yes.
Arena.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they decided, well, we can do better, and they haven't. But
No.
St. John Arena would rock, wouldn't it?
It's funny. My background is the Palestra, okay, which is one of maybe the oldest arena in college basketball. I do a lot of games at Allen Fieldhouse, Kansas. It's a cathedral. I've told many people this, including many of my Buckeye friends, if they really had forethought, they would have built a hockey arena for 10,000.
Exactly.
And they would have renovated St. John Arena the way Allen Fieldhouse has been renovated at Kansas, which all they ever did was the first coach who ever coached there was James Naismith. So there's so much history there. But I'll tell you, Dave, that's the great. I love that place so much. And St. John Arena is unbelievable. I did a random game 7 or 8 years ago at Ohio State, Iowa at Ohio State, and I remember telling Dan Wallenberg, the SID, I said, "Hey, can you take me over to St. John Arena and let me just walk through?" And he took me over. He opened the doors. He said, "Coach, I'll be back in an hour." And I walked through the place, and Alan Horniak and Jerry Lucas and John Havlicek, those big pictures are still in the hallway. And it would be an unbelievable home court advantage for the Buckeyes today had they renovated it. And the good news is, you guys know, they haven't torn it down yet.
Correct.
Because they were supposed to tear it down, as you guys know, 20 years ago. But maybe somebody will have a brain in their head and say, well, let's just renovate this place. Because
Yeah.
shot is, I mean, that's so antiseptic and blah, you know.
So true. So
I
true.
know. Yeah.
All of us guys get together and say, man, Andy Geiger did some really good things with facilities at Ohio
Yeah.
State, but this
Yeah.
was not one of them.
Tell
Really?
these guys, tell Lynn and Tory about the state tournament time.
Oh, well, I think they've lived that there too, but at the
Unbelievable.
Holiday Inn and
Oh,
it was sold out. I mean,
it's
I was a little
unbelievable.
kid growing up, Fran, and my
Yep.
dad would give us tickets and he would shoot me if I ever sold them. But I was tempted to many a time when I knew that there was going to be a sellout game, but
Yeah.
never did. But there
Yeah.
was a phenomenal experience obviously at the Holiday Inn. And as you grew up, you went on down the road to the varsity club. So it was an ideal setting.
Without a question. And you got to see all your coaching friends that you didn't see during the season, and it was unbelievable. Hey, as you notice, you guys don't have to ask me a lot of questions.
Coach, I actually got a phone call this morning when they learned that you were going to be on our podcast today, and went down to the state tournament. This would have been the late 80s. I don't know if you remember Steve Hall, who was from this area.
Of course.
A buddy of his, he was going to actually BG. He went down there with some friends without
Yep.
any tickets, and you got them in to the state tournament games, and they watched 4 games from the seats because of you. And he told me that story. He had on a Bowling Green jacket because he was going to Bowling Green, and
Yeah.
you just let him have it because he had that Bowling Green jacket on. I think Jimmy Jackson was maybe there at the time as well with those guys.
Yeah. We were recruiting Jimmy, and it's funny. That was kind of one of the perks of being at Ohio State, is that, we own the place, really. When you're at Ohio U or Bowling Green, you got a pea shooter. At Ohio State, we had the bazooka, so I could do anything I wanted with St. John Arena. But Steve was a wonderful guy. We obviously lost him too soon, and he was part of one of those early recruiting classes, And Tom Brando, we came from Fort Loramie, and obviously then we had some of the stars like Jimmy and Chris Gent from New Jersey, who Rick Barnes, before he left to go to George Mason as the head coach. And I'm an East Coast guy. He said, "Hey, there's a kid from Jersey." He goes, we should recruit him because I think his uncle lives in Columbus. It's a true story because they were originally from Michigan. They moved to New Jersey. And at the time, Chris was being recruited by Duke, Carolina, Bobby Cremins at Georgia Tech. And I luckily found out that Uncle Lou McGuire had a car dealership in Columbus. And when we went in and visited Chris and he came out for his visit, you talk about a guy that mirrored Gary Williams to a T. And then of course later on, Chris won a couple Big Ten titles with Jimmy and Jamal Brown and Mark Baker and those guys. Yeah, I could sneak those guys in. That wasn't a problem.
Well, Chris, he's still coaching the NBA, correct?
Yeah, he's with the Knicks now.
Yeah.
He's with the New York Knicks as associate head coach. So, and he's a guy that I didn't think would go into coaching, honestly. And he played in the NBA, won a couple championships with the Rockets. But boy, Chris and those guys, I'll say this to you guys. I wrote about it in my book. I wasn't close to Randy Ayers. And that's the way it goes. He didn't, I didn't think he treated me. I think he was worried about me taking over the territory that Rick Barnes had. But I've always said that had I stayed with him, he'd had 800 wins, because they ended up taking some guys, as you remember, Greg Simpson and Charles Macon. And we had kids, Coach Krauss, we were recruiting kids. We had a kid that wanted to come as a freshman. And I left to go to Providence with Rick Barnes. I don't know if you ever heard of the name Eric Snow. And Eric's brother played at Michigan State, Percy, but we were recruiting Eric Snow, Tony Miller at St. Joe's, who when he finished at Marquette, he was like 6th all time in the NCAA in assists. Michael Hawkins played with Eric Snow at Camp McKinley. I had it wired. I mean that. I don't want to be unhumble here. But, when I left and I saw the guys they were taking, I was like, gosh darn it, man. If you get in with a freshman at Ohio State and you do a good job of recruiting him, bringing him down for a football game in the fall, and you let him know that you want him to be a Buckeye, it's pretty much 75% over. At least that's how it was back in the day. And unfortunately, Randy and I didn't really get along. So when Rick Barnes was at Providence and Gary was leaving, and Gary's always said he should have stayed, I was going to Providence with Rick because he was kind of my big brother, and Gary went to Maryland. And as you know, Coach Krauss, Billy Hahn went to Maryland with Gary because that was the year he got fired at Ohio U. And so, it worked out great for me. I have no complaints at all. But I've had 3 or 4 dreams in the last 30 years where I woke up and I was still in Ohio State as an assistant, and I was excited. And then when I woke up, I was like, "Damn, it's only a dream." And that's how much I love being there. Honestly, it's 2 of the greatest years of my coaching career because it's just so good to be wearing that Buckeye polo.
Coach, I'm curious your battles with the Gene Cadies and the Bobby Knights and guys like that we had in the Big Ten at that time. Describe those games.
Judd
Heathcote, yes.
I was just talking to Mark Hughes last night, who's a front office guy for the LA Clippers. And if you remember, Mark was on those great Michigan teams. He was on the team, and here's what I would tell you. And I honestly, I'm not trying to sell my book but it's all fresh in my memory because I've written about this. In 88, 89, my second year and last year at Ohio State, there were 27 NBA players in the league. Michigan had 7 future NBA. That was the year they won it. And they played the Flying Illini in the Final Four. And, Steve Smith at Michigan State and B.J. Armstrong. And, Chris Gent was a freshman. He was our only NBA player on that young Buckeye team. But you're going to love this. I say this a lot, and I wrote about this. And I talked to Mark Hughes about it last night up in Boulder. Pound for pound, I coached 18 NBA players or recruited them. Pound for pound, the best player I ever coached was 5'11", 150, and his name was Jay Burson.
I was going to say.
Oh, yeah. Remember Jay?
And I'm going to tell you, that year in the Big Ten with all those pros, until Jay broke his neck, sadly, on a breakaway at Iowa, we were like in the top 4 of the league going into February. And it was mainly because of Jay. And as you know, Coach Krauss, I mean, he's the guy, he shot floaters before Steve Nash did.
That's right.
He was incredible. And I will say this, I've told Jay this too. When I was at Ohio U and he's playing at New Concord, I don't know, I can't remember.
John Glenn.
John Glenn High School. I said, he can't play in the Big Ten. I just was being, jealous. Like, there's no way this guy can play in it. We saw him in the state tournament, right? There's no way this guy can play in the Big Ten. I coached Jay for 2 years, and I'm telling you, that senior year, he was unstoppable. And he wasn't even, this sounds crazy, Coach Krauss, he wasn't even like a knockdown shooter either. He was a good shooter, but at his size, he did all of it in the mid-range with the floaters and the crazy stuff.
Yeah,
that was a great era, and I was a big Coach Knight fan growing up, and the competition between Gary, Gary had no fear. Coach Williams, he could get blood from a turnip. I mean, we had Curtis Wilson. I tried to get Jerry Francis to come to Ohio U, and when he committed to Ohio State, I was like, he can't play at Ohio State. And I mean, Gary had guys like Jerry who ended up being good enough to play in the Big Ten. But man, he squeezed every bit of talent out of those guys. I can tell you that.
Coach, it's funny because I jotted down 15 questions today at school, and I might get to ask you 2 of them, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
There's several things I want to piggyback on, but one thing I want to ask you: you clearly still have the juice, right? And so looking at your career now, you've been some places and seen some things. But as far as head coaching, like 10 years, and I'm sitting there today thinking, this guy could still do it. Why make that jump into media after only 10 years as a head coach?
It's funny, Tory. The title of my book is Don't Mess with Happy. I left coaching at 43. Now, when I went to St. John's, which was never a dream of mine, even being a New Yorker. We had great success in Manhattan. And they tried to get Rick Majerus, my buddy John Calipari, all the big names at St. John's. Nobody would take the job. And I was the golden boy in New York City. You know, Manhattan, we were good. We were upsetting teams in the tournament. They finally offered me the job, and it was similar to Ohio State recruiting wise because I didn't have to change the recruiting area. I knew New York. You know, when I went back home to Manhattan College, I knew New York City, the AAU guys, the great high school coaches in the Catholic League in New York. And so I took the job, and after 2 years, we got it turned around. Ron Artest, remember Meta World Peace, Felipe Lopez, and I interviewed at Arizona State with a guy named Kevin White, who later became the AD at Notre Dame and then Duke, and his son Michael's doing a killer job at Georgia, and his son Danny is the AD at Tennessee. So I interviewed at Arizona State, but I wasn't going to take the job. I just wanted a raise at St. John's because we had turned the program around, and I had a great class coming in, and I interviewed. Great to meet Kevin. I turned it down, and 5 weeks later, the priest at St. John's fired me for being disloyal. And you know, when you grow up Catholic, you know, someone once told me the longer you work at a Catholic school, the less likely you are to believe in God. I'm not sure if that's true, but I so I left St. John's. I coached at New Mexico for 3 years in witness protection. Right, my mom in Brooklyn, she said, "Fran, do I need a passport?" I said, "No, Mom, it's New Mexico. It's United States." And so after 3 years at New Mexico, and I replaced Dave Bliss, who was the coach at SMU when my wife went to school there. And unfortunately, you know, Dave never really did it by the book wherever he was. And as you know, when he left to go to Baylor, he left us a mess. The Baylor situation with the murder of the player. The kid that was murdered played for me at New Mexico and then transferred to Baylor.
Wow.
And then, of course, there would be no Scott Drew in Baylor if it wasn't for that. So I had a decision to make at 43 once I went to ESPN. And here's how it all finished up, because it's a great question, Tory. My buddy Tom Crean offered me the associate head coaching job at Marquette in 2007, 4 years into my broadcasting. I took the job. I sent my books up there, my files. And you got to understand, we were living in Dallas, Highland Park, which is an incredible part of Dallas. Matthew Stafford, Clayton Kershaw, Scotty Scheffler, SMU. It's a beautiful part of Dallas. And my wife's from there. My kids were doing well in school. I loved my job. I missed coaching, but 90 minutes before I got on the plane to go to Milwaukee, my boss at ESPN called me and said, "Listen, I'm not going to change your mind, but just want to ask you a question. Are you happy doing what you're doing?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Okay, that's all I wanted to know." He said, "And by the way, if you stay, I'm gonna lengthen your contract, but I don't want you to make that decision because of that." And I said to myself, don't mess with happy.
That's great.
And that's why I stayed in broadcasting. This is my 23rd year. I coached 23 years. And so you did a great job of researching, Tory, because that's actually the title of the book. And I've had two great careers in one. I'm undefeated every night. I got my biggest decision after a game is, do we go to Outback or Applebee's? You know, we don't have Bob. Hey, we don't have Bob Evans in Colorado, okay? Because I miss Bob Evans.
Is
Now
this
we got-
book in the works right now, Coach?
Yeah,
or is-
I pretty much finished writing it. Now we're just
Okay.
editing it and figuring out chapters and international basketball, which I was a big part of. You know, a lot of stories about my time at Ohio U and Ohio State, and you know, my head coaching career. But yeah, it's pretty much written, Lynn. I hope it works out well.
Well, I know people are going to ask while they're watching this.
Yeah.
Do you know when it's going to be released?
Probably October,
Okay.
right around the time the season starts, and you know, Big 12 Media Day, and probably around the time of October. So that's
Great.
knock
Great.
on wood. That's
Looking
what we're hoping.
forward to it.
Yeah.
And you know, we oftentimes we get going on here about everybody's favorite venues. You know, when we talk about Anderson Arena and Shot, et
Oh,
cetera,
Anderson.
or St. John, et cetera.
Yep.
But boy, your coaching career has taken you to the mecca of basketball and playing in the Garden. And
Yep.
then the Pit back in Albuquerque is well known. So
Pretty cool. Yep.
You've set foot in some unbelievable venues.
You know, well, first of all, coaching at New Mexico, I had to tell people I retired because of illness. They got sick of me. Okay. I went to three, and we were trying to rebuild the program after Bliss left. Honestly, no offense to him. Everybody knows this. We didn't inherit a great group of kids. And there was a rule at that time, Dave, the 5-and-8 rule the NCAA put in. This is a crazy rule. It never worked today, obviously. You could only recruit 5 players in 1 year and only 8 in 2 years.
Mm.
So I had to keep some guys. Otherwise, we were going to play with a team of walk-ons. They changed that rule after 2 years because it was so silly. But they were trying to keep retention going. Anyway, but the long and short of it is the pit was great. I've coached in the Garden, St. John Arena, Assembly Hall. Now I get to go to places like Allen Fieldhouse and Cameron, and I've had an amazing, for a basketball junkie who grew up in Brooklyn who wanted to be a coach. I've had an amazing career because I've gotten to do all the things I've ever wanted to do in basketball, and I'm still at it at my stage in my career. So I'm a lucky guy. Honestly, I don't work for a living.
I'm curious who got you into basketball, and if you can give us some mentors of yours that you looked up to once you got into the coaching world.
Well, I came from a big Italian Irish family in Brooklyn, Lynn, and my dad was a baseball guy. He was a short guy, 5'8". I obviously was short, so I grew up playing baseball, but I grew up loving sports. I mean, for us in New York, it was Knicks, Yankees or Mets, Jets or Giants, and then Rangers and Islanders. And so I grew up in a sports community. And it's funny that you say this because I didn't think of this man's name for about 30 years, but my little league coach, his name was Bobby Goonan. No one's ever heard of him. And all I can remember at 10, 11, 12 years old was the joy he had for coaching. Like, I never went to a practice with him without him having a smile on his face. And he even when we made an error or did something silly in a little league game, he always would, pump us up. I'm coaching at Manhattan years and years later. Okay, this is like the mid '90s, and it's after a game. And we had a simple little kind of an Anderson Arena type bandbox, and the game's over. I'm sure we won because we never really lost much at home at Manhattan. And he came to the game. I hadn't seen him in a long time, probably 30, 25 years.
Hmm.
And he just said, "I'm so proud of you." And when I wrote the book, once you get done writing a book, you still think of things that you want to add. And I said, I gotta add at least a couple chapters in my childhood about Bobby Goonan.
Mm.
Because when I really analyze it, like if you put me with a sports psychiatrist or psychologist and they take me back in time, I'd have to say he's the reason that I wanted to be a coach because he made it fun for us to go to baseball practice and play little league baseball for that guy.
That's great.
And that's how it happened. No one's ever heard of the guy. And I had other mentors, Danny Nee. And by the way, Krause, Danny Nee fired me 5 times, but he hired me 6.
There we go.
And I was never fired for longer than 24 hours. I once got a technical. We beat Ball State by 30 one night, and I get a technical foul in the middle of the second half. We're up 30, right? And so we go to the locker room at the Convo, and Danny says, "We're winning by 30 points, and I can't even effing enjoy the game because you're yelling with the officials. I don't want you to come in tomorrow. You stay home." And for a guy like me to say you can't come to the office was the worst thing you could tell me. And about 11:45, because we used to eat lunch every day, me, Billy, Han, and Danny, I get a phone call in my apartment because I didn't leave. 11:45, he goes, "Get your ass in here." And we walked up the hill from the Convo. Krause knows it well. And he hired me again.
That's great.
But
You
he was, Danny was an ex-Marine. And I mean, Rick
yeah.
Barnes, Gary Williams, Danny Nee, loved them all. I learned more about being a head coach from Danny Nee than either of those 2 Hall of Famers.
Yeah. Well, you're out of coaching, but every Monday or Wednesday when you're doing a big game on TV, that coaching hat comes on because you
Yes.
toss out some of the unbelievable nuggets. If I've been known to sit there and listen to some of the things that come out, and I'm writing them down because they're just
Yeah.
unbelievable coaching nuggets. And also, your coaching hat comes on when you probably deal with your coaching sons. So get into
Yeah.
that a little bit.
Well, let me tell you about what happened last night because it fits. I'm very good to officials. I think officials have a hard job. Most of the college officials are terrific. I'm on the NCAA Rules Committee. Last night we had a couple plays in the Colorado game. Kansas comes to town, and the officials had a bad night. There were 3 just missed calls in the second half, obvious. that, and I talked to, I got a text from the supervisor and he goes, "Hey, you were right. Those guys feel bad." But what happened, Krause, is when it happened, and I'll tell you what happened. A kid scores from Kansas, they go up three, and he's still out of bounds and knocks the ball loose from the inbounder, and he knocks it back onto the court. And he not only was out of bounds, which is a technical foul,
Right.
he picks it up and lays it in, and they didn't change nothing. It was like a
Whoa.
4 point play.
Whoa.
So my coaching hat comes on there too, because Tad Boyle, he's got 9 freshmen, and they're playing their ass off at home, and that changed the whole course of the last 5 minutes of the game. So I'm coaching both teams, and I'm reacting a lot of times like a coach. And like I said, most of the time the officials are very, very good at the Big 12 level, but sometimes when they screw up, my antenna goes up and I lose my mind. My two sons are coaching. Matt played at Harvard, took after mom. 5 years at Villanova with Jay Wright, got his MBA. He's back coaching at Harvard. And then my son James, who's 33 now, very proud of him because he spent a lot of time in the G League. He's now one of the youngest assistants in the NBA with the Washington Wizards. And they have a young team. Be honest, they're not trying to win. I get nervous when they take a lead in the game because they're trying to finish in the bottom four so they keep their draft pick. I know it sounds crazy, but that's how the NBA is right now because it's such a great class. And here's a cool story. When James was playing at Oklahoma, he was a terrific walk-on for Lon Kruger. He used to work out a sixth grader, a Norman kid, who was a good player. He worked him out for a couple years, sixth and seventh grade. And last week, they traded for Trey Young.
Huh. Wow.
And so he's going to Trey's going to recover from a knee injury, but once Trey's healthy, his workout guy is James Fraschilla, who worked him out in sixth grade.
Hmm.
And so it's, I got a bunch of these crazy stories, it's kind of, serendipity, really.
Absolutely. We can go on a lot of different angles with this, but let me just give you this. Like I said, to me, you're the czar of college basketball. And before we get into that, talk about your international, expertise. There's nobody better that knows the foreign, the game as well as you do. How did that all develop?
Well, it's changed. It's changed, Dave, because now so many of those kids that nobody knew about when I first started covering the draft in 2004, when I went to ESPN, that you would never see all these kids coming over to college. Like Illinois right now, right? The whole team is from former Yugoslavia. And those kids would never come over, but NILs change everything.
Yeah.
These kids now, you come from Belgrade, Serbia is like Detroit. It's like inner city Detroit.
Wow.
Poor. They love basketball. They play outdoors on the cement in the summer. And when you tell a kid in Belgrade that, hey, you can make 30 grand playing for the local Serbian team, or Brad Underwood's going to give you 750,000 to play at Illinois, and the agent's thinking, I can get 75,000 from this one kid, and you do it with 10 kids. Think about that.
Yeah.
Times have changed. But I had a Spanish player at Manhattan who was terrific. We took a trip to Spain. I did a number of clinics. When I got fired at St. John's that one year, I was doing some TV. I went overseas with UB Brown and George Carl and did some coaching clinics, and I fell in love with international basketball. And most people think of the dream team as the turning point for international basketball, right? Bird and Magic and Jordan, those guys. I say no. In the 60s and 70s, Red Auerbach, Dr. Jack Ramsey, UB Brown, Chuck Daly, Bob McKillop, who was an early guy to go over and do clinics, they all went overseas in the summer. Like the Italian Federation would invite Dean Smith to come speak at a 5 days of clinics, and it would be like a vacation for him and his wife. And we went over at that time in the 60s and 70s, and those great coaches taught the world basketball. And what's happened over 50 years is they're now teaching it back to us.
Yeah.
When you see spread pick and roll or guys like Jokic passing it or Doncic, they took our game. I don't want to say they made it better. All they've done is they've shrunk the globe. And now we learn from them. They learn from us. You're seeing their stuff come into the NBA, pick and roll, college, high school. And I just fell in love with the game because I've always been in love with the game. When you knew me back when, I had no idea about international basketball, but then ESPN threw me on the draft. I had a lot of connections overseas, and now I haven't done the draft for a number of years, and the draft sucks right now. I hope I don't find out that that I said this, but when Woj came to ESPN, he brought two guys with him, and the deal was they had to do the draft, and he's gone now. But the draft, in my mind, is not the same at ESPN because we had people like me that knew the kids, and now they just interview the parents, and you don't know how this kid's fitting in with this team, and how's Debanza going to fit with the Wizards, or should you take Cam Boozer, or what about the kid from Serbia? And so I still follow it closely, but I'm not on the draft anymore, and
Okay.
I would love to because I know all these kids, I still do.
Yep. Well, let's take it back to the United States then.
Okay.
We're going to give you the magic wand, Fran. Okay, you're the czar of college basketball. You can change anything you want to change. What are we changing?
Well, first of all, if you're ever going to have a commissioner of college football or college basketball, you can't do this without giving them teeth. There's no way you can give somebody the authority to make the decisions that have to be made without having someone with real juice, that everybody's going to trust. And there's nobody that I can think of out there right now. All these conference commissioners are about their own conference. We know that, right? From a standpoint of the players and the NIL and all this stuff, like first of all, let's take the transfer portal. Give me a one-time transfer. I'm cool with that. You transfer a second time, you have to sit out unless your coach gets fired or your coach leaves. Okay, 4 schools in 4 years is ridiculous. Nobody's there's two words. Webster's dictionary just took two words out of the dictionary in the last couple of years, and that is graduation rates.
Exactly.
Nobody cares about that anymore, unfortunately, right? So the transfer portal, I think, has got to be solved. I just don't think you can have. I don't care about regular students. I don't care about the flutist in the band at Toledo. I know he can leave and go to Ohio State, but you got anarchy right now if you don't fix the transfer portal. The NIL thing's unfortunate because the NCAA 20 years ago should have set up a system of stipends. Hey, you get 50 grand. If you're at a power school, you get 50 grand a year. We put it into your escrow. After your sophomore year, you got 125 in there. You can start to withdraw it. But when you graduate, we give you another bonus. And now when you graduate in 4 years or 4.5 years, you got 150, $200,000 in there or more. And that should have been done years ago. And the NCAA got greedy. I just don't know how they're going to put the genie back in the bottle. They're going to have to, in the next 5 to 10 years, fix the whole regionalization because having UCLA go to Rutgers is stupid. Okay.
Yep.
That's idiotic. Nobody thinks that's good. Having Stanford go to Clemson is stupid. Okay, so at some point, some smart people are going to fix all this. But Krause, right now, I just think the genie's out of the bottle, and it's never going to be what we knew growing up. And it's not like I'm against players getting some money and NIL. I think they deserve it, but we're not Izzo's right. We're not teaching any lessons about toughness and handling adversity and waiting your turn and sacrificing for the team. And you got all these agents now that are crawling into bed with the high school families, and it's really tragic. So I don't have an answer. I just know we're in a mess.
Coach, does the NCAA have any teeth anymore? Speaking of having teeth, they seem helpless to me.
I know they're so afraid of losing these court cases. And it's interesting, Tory, when I got fired at St. John's, I went out. I had a good friend who had a friend who's now become a close friend of mine. And this was the best one of the best 5 law firms in the country in Washington, D.C. Williams and Connolly. Edward Bennett Williams founded the Redskins, okay? And they have 50 partners. So if they have 50 partners, they probably have about 1,000 lawyers or 750 lawyers. And I went out and got the best lawyers I could to fight what happened to me at St. John's. I got all my money. And I learned a lesson about having great representation. I don't know if these NCAA attorneys, what they call the last person that finishes last in a law school class, right?
Lawyer.
Lawyer. I don't know if they have bad attorneys that have been representing them. But to me, I think you go out and get the best you can and you represent the NCAA against some of these frivolous lawsuits. And, you could do something about it. But no, they don't have a lot of teeth right now and they're afraid to be sued. So
Uh, we,
it's
yeah,
just unfortunate.
we've seen examples of that just like today, I think, where,
Yeah.
you
Kid in
know,
Alabama.
the kid from Alabama gets
Mhm.
a comeback and he's played in the G League. Now he's get a temporary restraining order to play right now for Bama.
And although he didn't play a game in the NBA, he signed an NBA contract, which is different than some of these other guys in the last few weeks that, got their eligibility. It's absurd. Everybody knows it's absurd. The lawyers are getting wealthy. These kids in some cases are benefiting, but it's a broken system. It's just no other way to say it.
Well, if I had a vote for the leader of college basketball, I think we're
Well,
looking at him.
You got three
Well,
votes there.
I wouldn't do it I mean, honestly, I don't think I'd be qualified. I mean, I'd be qualified to lend my support and opinion, but until somebody is like a commissioner of like we have in the NFL or the NBA or Major League Baseball, unless somebody is there making these decisions and being the judge and jury, I don't think you're going to see it. And I don't know much about collective bargaining agreements. I've been told that you can have one and not have the kids be called professionals, but in a sense, they're already, professionals now. But what about the kid at Bowling Green? Like, if and I'm just saying this off the top of my head, if there's a freshman at Bowling Green that's averaging 17, it's going to be really hard for Todd Simon to keep him next year.
For sure.
And again, I don't want anybody to leave there. I'm just, I know Todd, and you just can't do it because somebody's already in his ear at Christmas time. Hey, I talked to Minnesota, and it's not Minnesota. I'm just using it as an example. And I think we can get you there, and they're going to give you X. That's going on all over the place.
Yeah, it's almost as if that level of collegiate basketball has become JUCO.
Oh, and prep school where you only have a kid 1 year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, Tory, it's happening. It's even worse in college football because there's so many more kids.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Well, we gotta. This is too serious now. We gotta
Yeah.
back it off and have
Yeah,
some
yeah, yeah.
fun. But we know that the coaching background, we know that the international background, and all this and that. But
Yeah.
people don't realize you're an actor. You
Uh,
were in a film that was awesome. So number one, did you have to get a Screen Guild thing?
I get a
join
check.
that?
I get a check every 3 months for like $337.42. Like,
So you're a you're a card
I don't
carrying.
know. I know I get the checks from SAG-AFTRA. That's all I know.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's pretty cool.
And here's the genesis of it. Right down I-75, there's a guy that grew up in the Dayton area. His name is Dan Patrick. You probably heard of Dan Patrick,
Yeah.
okay, ESPN. He called me one day, and we were friendly at ESPN. And he's a big basketball guy. I think he played at Dayton, right? I think Dan played a little bit at Dayton. I think he started at Eastern Kentucky,
Eastern.
right? And but anyway, Dan loves basketball. And he called me one day and he goes, "Hey, I got a friend who's doing a movie, and he needs somebody that knows the international game. He wants to have his people reach out to you and get some advice about how to do the movie and maybe help them get some current player that could play the role." And I said, Dan, I'd be willing to help. What's the guy's name? And he said, Adam Sandler. I said, okay, yeah, I think I could do this. So I talked to Adam's people, and we all know Adam Sandler, and he always seems like a great guy. The parts he plays and see him on the different shows. So I helped out his production people, and they said to me, "Hey, we're probably going to want to have you in the movie as a reward for helping us." Great. Well, COVID hits, and the movie production shuts down. And then I see about a year later, 21, that they've started up the filming again. They're in Mallorca, they're in Philadelphia, and I'm like, damn, man, they never call me. And so at the end of the thing where they were filming everything, I get the call. Hey, coach, it's August. Can you come to Philly like first week of September? We want you to shoot your scene. I'm in. I get to Philly. I have a trailer with my name on it. I swear, I could have slept in it. I really could have. They gave me a haircut, makeup. I brought my own clothes. But here's the cool thing. They had a script writer, right? Obviously, you have a script for a movie. And one of Adam's friends was a small college coach in New Hampshire, and he says to the scriptwriter, Coach Fran don't need a script. Let him wing it. So they said, okay, cool. So here you go. All right. I don't know. For some reason, it's still in my head. We've been watching Kermit Wilt since he was 14 in AAU. We knew he was going to be an NBA player, but this kid, Bo Coos, I thought I knew every player in the world, and I never heard of this guy. One take, one take, boom. And so Adam wasn't there because I filmed it early in the morning. And he comes in mid-morning, and I'm standing on the side. They're doing the basketball scenes, kind of like the NBA Combine. And he comes up to me and he taps me on the chest. He goes, "Coach, I heard you killed it." And so that was cool. I went back home. They got done with the movie, and I got to go to the premiere with my wife in LA, walk the red carpet, and get about $300 every 3 months. So it's cool.
Well, for those people who don't know the movie, it's
Hustle. Yes.
on
Yeah.
Netflix. Yeah.
And it's a great movie. It's got a lot of basketball cameos in it. You actually, Dave, have to watch it 2 or 3 times to say, oh, that's Tyrese Maxey from the Sixers, or, that's Trey Young. Trey's in the movie. There's a lot of cool basketball people in it. Brad Stevens, Kenny Smith, Fran Fraschilla. Pretty cool.
Coach, what really impresses me about you is you clearly have never forgotten your roots and where you came from. And guys like Dave Krauss or Kirk and Jay Lehman, things like that, it's clear you're a relationship guy. So briefly touch on the importance of relationships and the role they've played in your career.
I tell young coaches, including my 2 sons, they'll say to me, "Hey, Dad, do you know so-and-so?" I go, "Yeah, I've known him for 30 years. He'll be at an AAU tournament. Hey, Dad, you know Damon Handed?" "Yeah, I recruited in DC back when Damon was running this AAU club." I tell young coaches in their 20s, the guys that you hang around with now, they're going to be your friends the next 30 years. And you might hire a guy, they may hire you. You may get fired and they'll hire you, or you may compete against each other in the Big 12 someday. But Scott Drew and Grant McCaslin last night, Baylor, Texas Tech. So Tory, I always, it's a lifetime of relationships. I thank you for saying that. Dave's the kind of guy where, and he knows this, I might not talk to him for a year, or, get a note from him or a text. And there are people in my life that I met in my 20s that I still have relationships with, or when they call on me and they say, "Hey, can you come on our podcast?" It's a lifetime. And but the young coaches need to know that, because the guys that I knew in my 20s, like Coach Krauss, man, Kirk Lehman, for example, these are people that came into my life at that age. Like I came into Dave's life, and all the people I got to know in Northwest Ohio, and it's just how it should be. And even now, I look at my role as a broadcaster. I'm still a mentor to a lot of young coaches, and believe it or not, a lot of young head coaches, because and I'm talking about head coaches at power conferences, where I'll get a call, from and I won't even mention names, but hey, coach, can you come? Hey, would you mind spending a couple days with us at practice? Just see what you think. And those kind of relationships are forever. I met Tom Izzo when I was 21. I met John Calipari. I just texted with John today because I'm doing an Arkansas game next week. How about this? We were 19-year-old sophomores. We didn't know each other, Pittsburgh and New York, and we met each other at Dean Smith's basketball campus, counselors. 1978. I met Izzo shortly after that. Izzo and Tom and I took Tom Crean under our wing when Tom was a young guy up in Alma, Michigan, and that's how it works. These are my friends for life, really, and everybody's got those stories. Whether it's high school or college. Krause knows there's people that he's known for 40 years that he probably still talks to.
Yeah, I've got you just jogged my memory. I was sitting in a Russian history class, winter quarter, first day at Kent State University, cold as heck in Kent in 1974 or whatever it might have been.
Nick Saban. Not Nick.
This is a basketball guy. So across
okay.
me, I look over this guy's notebook, and he's X and O in his notebook,
Wow.
And I'm looking over here, and I got to meet this guy. We go out in the hallway, Dan Peters.
Oh, man.
The
How
late Dan
about that?
Peters. You know, that's when I first met him, and we were long friends, and that's a guy we lost way too early.
Yeah. Oh man, all those guys from Bobby Huggins when he was at Walsh College, and his dad. No, I mean the greatest thing about the state of Ohio, and again, those were the formative years of my coaching career. I got there at 23. I left at 31 to go to Providence, and we all have those stories about relationships. So it's critical, and luckily I have a lot of them even today.
Coach, growing up in Brooklyn, whether it be at James Madison or Brooklyn College or when you were coaching in Manhattan or St. John's,
Yep.
your Italian heritage, where were you
Yes.
going for a slice of pizza in New York?
Well, let me tell you something. The best pizza in the world right now is in Denver, Colorado, because
Okay.
there's a guy named Bill Fickey he was a high school teammate of Larry Brown on Long Island. He then later played at a school called Belmont Abbey, and his coach was Al McGuire. And
Wow.
he became great friends with Doug Moe, and he later became an assistant with the Nuggets. And anybody in basketball who goes through Denver, anybody, they still have, and he coached in the old ABA too. So, when I get invited up to see Big Bill, he's 6'9". Rick Barry's a neighbor of mine. I live a mile from Rick Barry, but George Carl, all those ABA guys. So I got to give Big Bill Fickey a shout out in Denver. But, New York pizzas, you can get great New York pizza anywhere. And, I grew up in an Italian family, so I'm used to good Italian food. Trust me.
Yeah.
Hey, what's the name of the place? What's the name of the pizza place? I don't think you said the name of the place.
Oh, Big Bill's New York style. Big Bill.
Okay.
Bills.
Centennial.
All right, there it is.
It's a Centennial. Right off of I-25, and every couple months he'll say, "Hey, I got an ABA reunion. Come on up." And I hang out with all those guys from the old ABA. And as I said, Rick's a neighbor. I see Rick Barry on occasion, but it's really cool. But I can find
good.
I can find good pizza, Lynn, just about anywhere.
Okay. Okay. What are you putting on it, Coach?
Give me some sausage. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. But it's funny. I thought you were going to talk about my Italian heritage. Last year, my wife and I. Here's the greatness of America. You ready? My grandparents came from Sicily in 1920. Spoke no English. My grandfather was a street sweeper, sanitation worker. My father was a high school dropout, Korean War veteran, raised 7 kids. I was the first to go to college, and I had a son go to Harvard. That's America.
Yeah.
That's America.
Yeah.
So,
And you got your degree in American history, right?
I'm a history nut. I am American history, Civil War. And I'll be honest with you, it all comes back to Ohio because growing up, I had 2 coaching idols. You've heard of them both. Robert Montgomery Knight from Orrville, Ohio, and then a guy named Woody Hayes, who was over from
Newcomerstown.
that's right. Yep, right
New
there.
Philly?
Over that
Yeah,
way.
New Philly,
Yep.
right up I-77.
Yep.
Am I right?
Yeah,
Yep.
right in there.
Yep.
Yep.
Right up and I worship those 2 guys.
That's great.
And Coach Knight and I, we got sideways a couple times in the broadcasting career, but I got it. Can I talk about Coach Knight for a second?
Sure.
Absolutely.
All right. So this is Coach Knight, and I know you guys will love this. How long did I say I was coming on? I got all the time in the world, but when you got to go, let me know. But we play Ohio U. We go to Indiana on a Saturday afternoon. By the way, I don't know if you guys are still able to pick up Don Fisher randomly, but I drove up to Boulder from Colorado Springs the other night. And Krause, I got goosebumps because I can remember being a young coach in Ohio, driving around on a Saturday afternoon, maybe coming back from a game and listening to Don Fisher call an Indiana Hoosier game. Coach Knight and Dockich and Alford and, Steve Isle and those guys. And
Coach, I grew up with that. I would have the radio on in my bed at night after I had to go to bed, listening to the great Don Fisher because I'm a big
Fisher was unbelievable
fan.
the other night. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, we go over to Indiana on a Saturday afternoon in December, Ohio U, and Danny never hesitated to play all, DePaul, Duke, Carolina, Indiana, Ohio State. So we go over to Indiana, and Coach Knight liked Danny because of Digger Phelps. Digger and Coach Knight go back to when they were young coaches in New York. Coach Knight loved that Digger never cheated. And so we play them. And Alford, it's the year after Alford played in the Olympics. So it had to be 84, 85. And we had a good team. And I think we won the MAC that year. But we go over there on a Saturday afternoon. We lose like 91-77. It's a thrill, obviously, right, to play in there. After the game, Coach Knight says to Danny, call me tomorrow. I want to tell you about your team. I want to give you the scouting report. So Billy Hahn and I, the next morning, Sunday morning, we go to church. Danny said, hey, meet me at noon. I'll talk to Coach Knight. We go in at noon. He had a pad full of notes. And Coach Knight said, hey, I really like what you did with the big guy on the right block, but he can't score on the left block, so keep him on the right block. This play gave us trouble. This play was easy to guard because you had two equal sized guys. We could switch that. And Coach Knight gave us the scouting report of our team, and we took it to heart. And there was also a great tape that Adidas made. I have it. Krause, I might have to send it to you. But Coach Knight sat in his chair, and he just talked about winning. And you don't want to win the day of the game. You want to win 2 days before and 3 days before. And you got to understand the things that not just go into winning, but you got to eliminate the things that go into losing, right? This is all Coach Knight speak. We played that tape before every pregame meal the rest of the year at Ohio U. And we won the MAC. And Coach Knight, for all his foibles and bulliness, but here's two more great Coach Knight stories. He heard that I said something negative about his Texas Tech team, okay? And it was BS. So a friend of a friend of a friend said, Fran said this about Texas Tech. So he told his SID, I don't want that guy coming to our walkthrough Saturday when we play Kansas. So I called my boss and I said, hey, he's not going to let me into the shoot around. What should I do? My boss said, do what you want. You don't want to go. Who cares? You're still going to be prepared. And I thought, and I said, I'm going. Because I knew Coach Knight. I studied him more than anybody at ESPN, even Jay Billis, who played for Coach K. So I said, I'm going to the shoot around. So they come in, day of the game. He's looking at me with the evil eye from the other end of the court. And they start warming up and shooting. And he's looking down at me every 5 minutes and he's giving me the evil eye. And finally, they take a water break and he comes barging over to me. He goes, hey, you think we ought to recruit junior college players? And I said, Coach, hell yeah, you're in West Texas. They got 10 JUCOs. He goes, yeah, me too. And that was his way of saying, you had the guts to come to my shoot around. Okay? Because I knew Coach Knight, you have to stand up to the bully. Here's the last Coach Knight story. He wasn't very good on TV, as you know. He took me out of the Big 12 for 3 years, so I went to Big East, which was fine. But he wasn't very good. He'd say, the big white kid's got to screen better, or number 43, whatever. So it's the end of his contract. It's like this is it, the end of the season. And John Saunders and I always did the NIT in the Garden. So my boss calls us and says, hey, listen, you guys know it's Coach Knight's swan song. Do you mind if he does the NIT with you guys? It's a 3-man booth. And I was like, hell yes, I want to do it. I want to do it. Okay. So Coach Knight is with us. Karen, his wife, is with us. And the game starts. First semifinal at the Garden. Couple possessions, and the guy takes a bad shot. And I say, Coach, that's not a shot you'd have let Buckner take, right? And he went off. He was like, you're damn right, Fran. Buckner would have been his ass would have been sitting right next to me as soon as I could get him out, And then I said, Coach, what was it like bringing West Point down here to the NIT? He said, Fran, we'd get on the 347 Metro North out of Poughkeepsie, and we would be at Penn Station at 4:41. And I'd send the team to the locker room, and I'd go get a hot dog before I went and saw him. And anyway, we had a great time. The game ends, and he gets up and he slaps me on the back, and he says, that was enjoyable. But here's the cool thing. I got to be very close to his son, Pat, through the years. And Pat was scouting in the NBA, and he texted me. He said, thanks for taking care of my dad. And I have a partiality for people that have helped my two boys. And anytime I can help a coach's kid who's in the business, I go out of my way because, like that meant a lot to me that Pat said that. And again, I saw the good side of Coach Knight. We all saw the bad side. But later on, when he retired, right before he moved back to Bloomington, I'd go out and do a Texas Tech game, and I'd call his wife, and I said, hey, I got a book for Coach Knight. Can I come out and visit you guys? And this was when he was starting to lose his memory. And I remember bringing out a brand new General Grant book, Ron Chernow, the historian. And I don't even know if he ever read it, but I knew Coach and I both loved General Grant. And by the way, the three top generals on the North, Grant, Sherman, and the cavalry, Sheridan, Phil Sheridan, all born in the state of Ohio. And when you drive down from Columbus to Athens and you stop in Lancaster, that's the home of General William T. Sherman. And you go 13 miles east to Somerset, Ohio, it's the home of Little Phil Sheridan, who was the cavalry commander. And of course, General Grant was born on the Ohio River in Georgetown, right outside of Cincinnati. So Coach Knight and I both loved the Civil War. And that's why I love Coach Knight and Coach Hayes. And that's why I became a military history guy. I think you asked me that question 15 minutes ago.
Oh,
All right. You guys got enough of me?
No, we could spend hours more,
Yeah.
believe us.
your wife's probably got the Italian dinner on the table, though.
I don't know.
ready to go.
She's Irish. I don't think so.
Okay.
I got a Jersey Mike's ready to go because I'm watching ball tonight.
Good.
Coach, how do you and we'll let you go, but how do you do anything special to keep your mind sharp? Because I mean, you're rattling off these names from just decades and decades. Do you do anything special or you just stay active?
You know what, Tory? One thing I did not do when I was coaching, especially being a head coach, is I didn't work out as much as I do now. And I would really recommend anybody who's coaching. I don't care if you're the line coach at Fort Loramie, okay? Yeah, I like that one. That's pretty good.
Man,
Tom Brandaway would be happy with you.
Tommy Brandaway. But I think I work out every single day. I haven't missed working out probably, Tory, 7 days in 10 years, and maybe longer because I'm a fanatic. I got my workout in this morning. I got up right now. So anyway, that's a key. And I'm around basketball every day of my life, honestly. I really am. And so and I like other things, but basketball's been my life and I love it. And I love to work out and I love my family and I read a lot and, I've got a pretty simple life. So, but I think working out has kept me sharp. When I'm up here in the Colorado mountains here, I live 500 yards from NORAD. Seriously. So if we ever get into a tussle with China, we better be damn good because they're coming my way. I swear. Because I mean, honestly, we're done. We're cooked. Literally and figuratively. But I walk the mountains of Cheyenne Mountain here in Colorado Springs sometimes for 2 hours and stay in shape.
Coach, man,
the book's going to be good, man. The book's going to be good.
Well, we'll definitely pick up a copy, but
Yeah.
I just can't tell you what a pleasure it's been, man.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Like Dave's one of those guys. I've said that we may not talk for a while, but there are people like Dave who have been kind to me through the years. We still probably have a lot of great stories about OU basketball camp. Remember the year Billy Hahn's brother Jimmy brought this eighth grader from
With this Sean Kemp kid, who is he?
some kid named Sean Kemp came down as an eighth grader at camp. Remember? And
I
then,
do.
hey, one more Ohio U camp story. My buddy Rock Eisenberg from Brooklyn. I don't know if you remember Rock, Dave, but he brought a bunch of kids out from Brooklyn, from New York City, a bunch of African American kids, and we're getting ready to start the afternoon games, and we can't find the 8 kids from Brooklyn, right? And we get a call from security. Hey, they're not causing any trouble, but there's 8 kids out here in 4 golf carts just driving around the golf course. And I'm like, all right, I'll come get them. And the Ohio U police officer said, Coach, now they're not causing any trouble at all, but they're just driving up and down the course. And I said, I'll come get them. And I go get the kids. And I go, what are you guys doing, man? And they said, Coach, we've never been in a golf cart before. We just wanted to see what it was like. And you got to understand, we grew up in the asphalt jungle. So, but anyway, to your point, Tory, Dave Krauss calls and says, try to come on my podcast. Done deal.
Well, thank you so much. It has been an absolute honor. I know you have a million other things you could do on a Wednesday night and then talk to 3 guys in Liberty Center, Ohio, small town. But thank you so much. And whenever you're on ESPN, and I know you're an announcer, I'm not turning it off.
Yeah.
because I love listening to you. You do a fantastic job. I learn something every time you're calling a game, and just want to thank you for everything you've done for college basketball and
Thank you.
and coming on this podcast with
Thanks,
us. It's
Lynn. And
greatly appreciated.
I'll leave you with this. I learned something about basketball every week of my life. So, and I know Coach Krauss knows what I'm talking about. So,
Absolutely.
as much as I love the game and love sharing it, I learned something. He might have a drill and we're talking ball, and I might say, damn, I wish I knew that drill 30 years ago. I could have used that drill, right? He still
Yeah.
does that.
Yeah, we
So,
still do
hey,
that.
it's a pleasure. Have me back on in the fall. If we get the book out on time,
Okay.
I'll come out and tell you more about it.
Well, if we get you on in the fall, you may have to pick some high school football games because that's our deal that time of year.
I might be able to do that. We used to go up to Maycomber High School and watch the high school Friday night game and hope Jimmy Jackson was in the stands and hang out with Jimmy. Seriously, and
Yeah.
one more Jimmy Jackson story. Here we go. We didn't cheat at Ohio State, but one year, and Randy Ayers gets credit for this. We invited every single black civic leader in Toledo in the spring down to the Scarlet and Gray course. About 40 guys. We threw a golf outing for them, and we had we had a cookout. We had the mayor, deputy mayor, the schools, whoever we thought. All we told them was, when you go back to Toledo, just tell Jimmy and his family it's only one place you need to go. And they did that for us. And Jimmy could have got a lot of money. Jimmy could have got a lot of NIL back in that day, and all he got was, I did give him this. He always mentions this, the pizza place next to the varsity, near the old Holiday Inn.
Tommy's.
What is it?
Tommy's Pizza.
Tommy, I said to Tommy one day, Tommy, I got to make a certificate and I want you to okay this. And the certificate said, Tommy's Pizza, lifetime pizza for Jimmy Jackson. I swear. And Tommy said, absolutely. And every time I see Jimmy, he goes, Coach, you don't notice, but that could have been the thing that swayed me. So we didn't cheat, but we kind of played around the edges. So, all right. See you guys. All the
Thank
best.
you.
Coach.
Thank you
Bye,
so
man.
much. Appreciate
Okay.
it.
Thanks,
Best
Coach.
wishes.
He's great. Sum it up for us, Coach Krauss, because you've known Fran for a long time.
We could have gone a long time on a lot of different ways with him. He's just that's him. What you saw there and what you listened to, that's him for years. He hasn't changed. He's the first time you met him, you heard this Brooklyn accent. He's kind of lost it a little bit, but he had this strong Brooklyn accent. You knew he was from New York, and you knew that Danny Nee hired him for a reason. He could talk, and he could sell ice to an Eskimo, that whole mentality. And whether or not he knew a lot of basketball, he had that way to work with kids and build those relationships that you talk about. And he's just he was just great. And I always look back and I say, he taught me one thing that I remember and I'd never seen before at camp. And he showed me a drill that you do it like an inside out dribble. I'd never seen that before. And there's this guy from Brooklyn. So this is a good move. You got to fake him like you're going left, but you bring it right back. And it's just something it's part of the game now. It's been part of the game for years, but Fran's just classic. He's one of a kind. Doesn't, like Tory said, didn't forget where he's come from and the people that made the way for him. And he's classic.
The only thing I'll say to wrap up my thoughts is I get a little nervous when a guy like him talks about some basketball camps back in the day because those coaches, Lynn, they had some fun when the kids went back to the dorms and so forth. I mean, they had a good time. Fellowship, camaraderie, some late nights.
Oh.
And so I get a little nervous when, is he going to give out too much information? But he didn't.
Yeah. Well,
That basketball fraternity, and I know every sport would say this about their coaches, I don't know if I've ever seen a tighter fraternity than these basketball coaches, honestly. And you just saw evidence of it right there.
Yeah.
I mean, you got a big-time guy talking to us like he's a Henry County guy.
Yeah, he could have done a lot of things tonight, spending an hour and 10, 15 minutes talking to us.
Unbelievable.
Big ESPN analyst, and he spends time with us.
I was going to ask him one question. You kind of jumped in after my actor in that whole acting deal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there is one active coach today in collegiate basketball, and he would have known this answer, but it's a trivia, good trivia, who is still a card-carrying member of the Actors Screen Guild. And he did it as a young kid because his parents were in the business, and he became a child actor. And he coaches in the Big 12. But he coached at Pittsburgh before that. I can't give you any more hints.
Coached at Pitt?
Um,
Not Ben Howland.
Nope. Current coach, TCU.
Dang it.
Yeah, I can see him.
Yeah,
Jamie,
you got it.
can't think of his last name.
Jamie Dixon.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep, he's a active card-carrying member of the Actors
I did not
Screen-
know that.
Yeah,
Wonder if he'd have got that.
I think he probably would.
He might have.
He probably would have known that,
I
being in
believe
the Big
it would.
12.
Yeah,
Yeah.
He's sharp.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
Boy.
neat guy.
Who do we got next week?
Right now, we are in process of trying to piece together a show, but we'll have one.
Okay. We always do. I let that up to you. That's why I pay you the big bucks.
Oh yeah, I appreciate that. Maybe a Tommy's Pizza, and I can do that. So,
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. We'll be back next Wednesday again with our latest basketball podcast presented by the Gherkin Companies.